Hello and welcome back to the Unreal Engine live stream. I'm your host, Alexander Pascal, and joining me today is Michael Noland. Yay! So today we're going to be talking about the preview, the 4.15 preview and all that. First, we're going to go over all the news, community spotlights, and whatnot. So, to the main screen. Pow. Whoa, that was an interesting transition. I don't think I've seen that one before. So, first things up is actually a series of tabs here that are all for the same thing. And Michael here actually has a little something to say about this one, but this is for Global Game Jam. Happened last weekend. If you're a part of Global Game Jam, then you're probably familiar with the site up here. You've probably submitted something cool. If you submitted something with UE4 game, by the way, I would be interested in hearing about it, so send it over to me. But Michael and I were over at UNC, and we both were in different teams. Michael, tell me a bit about this game here you made.
Sure. So the team that I worked on made a game called Boops, Bees, and Bears. And
here's the team
you
over
basically use your voice as your weapon. So you're running around a level. If you scroll down a little bit, there's some screenshots.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. And so you have to basically hold a note and charge up your weapon, and then when you let go of that note, your weapon will fire, and then you're taking out jerk bees and derpy-looking bears.
Yeah, of course, jerk bees. They're the worst. And by hold down a note, you mean literally to sing a note. Because you guys
so like you can see here in the middle of the
input.
screen, like make these sounds. That's sort of like the low note, the medium note, and then the high note. You either have to kind of do falsetto or whistle or something to actually hit it.
Wow.
And the longer you hold it down, like the faster the projectile will go and stuff like that. But just in general, like if you haven't done game jams before, we've got like the quarterly game jam that we do.
Mm-hmm.
The global game jam is every year. Ludum Dare happens about 4 times a year, roughly. It's great fun. Itch.io's got a whole bunch of different game jams going on at any given time as well.
Yeah, itch.io is a great way to find a lot of info about jams too.
Yeah. The global game jam I think was over 10,000 people and something like 7,000 games created. So it's pretty
my
cool.
goodness. Yeah, we definitely saw a ton of new UE4 titles coming out of it, and it was really neat.
Yep.
Over at UNC, a lot of people were just starting up and learning in Unreal for the first time and got pretty far for first attempt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just such a clever idea, and it was really fun to work next to you guys as I got to listen to Travis make ridiculous noises, and same thing with Nick.
Well,
and
shout out to Exy as well for on the forums, because we started with some of his code to pull the microphone data and stuff.
The visualizer code that he's got on there, because he has a
I don't think we really used any of the actual visualization code to do the signal processing, but got it started.
Yeah, so Exy, thank you, buddy. I think we've highlighted that one before, and I've definitely retweeted it a couple times. It's a great little plugin.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's Boops, Bees, and Bears from Global Game Jam. Mine I'm going to go over a lot faster because it's not as impressive. Dream Waver. This was me, Matt Williams off of support team, and 2 students who are over here, Alex Cuzzy and Brandon, whose name doesn't show as his real name. But we joined up a team here. We've got what was this? A 4-player local co-op game that we did, where it was just a lot of shooting at each other, and you can't see it because we didn't get a lot of good screenshots of it, but basically you hold down the right trigger, and as you hold it down, the further you hold it, the more of a sine wave is forced into your bullet's shot path, so it starts to curve more and deal more damage, but it's harder to aim. And so that was kind of our wave theme. But I just wanted to say, like, if anyone out there wants to check out Global Game Jam games, there's a ton of them on here. They're all free to download. And I just want to show you all some cool shots you sent me. So a ton of people were sending me info and linking me to these. Paulo Souza sent me this. And funny note, there was this one here in I think this was the one out of Brazil, or I'd have to double check it, but when he sent me the message here, he mentioned that this was, when I got a message about this, they said it was the 2nd largest game jam location, or like the 2nd largest attendee list. And then I got another message from the St. Louis group saying the same thing, that they were the 2nd largest. So I'm going to have to go check the numbers and figure out who is actually. Maybe they had the same exact amount of people show up or something, but I thought that was funny that I got 2 messages from 2 different groups saying that they had the 2nd largest group of people. Jess also participated. Her Global Game Jam game was made alongside, I think she said she got stuck, she actually got put into a team with some guys from like Chinese Room and like a couple other veterans and stuff. So she said it was pretty impressive, and they were like the most veteran team, but they made Crime Wave City. It's really cute and fun and bubbly game, so check it out. That's also cool. Joseph Azam. You know, I've never gotten a chance to really make sure I got that right. But Joseph sent me, or Joseph posted this, and he didn't send this to me, but I saw it and I thought it was really neat. And he had mentioned over to I think to Jan that he used his floating rock tutorial to help smooth out some stuff. It's really cool to see y'all in real time working on stuff, and then later like talking about how you used each other's tutorials and information about it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was the Brazil group, is what they're telling me. Yeah. But yeah, very cool to see. To see that kind of connection happening in real time from like an old like a tutorial that's been sitting around for a while. Hey, I made something, by the way. Thanks for that tutorial. And then yeah, I took some screenshots of everything that went down there, or some screenshots. I took some real life shots. Ha 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 ha! Oh my gosh, I'm thinking. Yeah, shut up, Clint. Clint's making fun of me immediately. You can see Matt over here looking really tired with the rest of my crew. And then if you look in these pictures that I've been submitting, you'll see lots of those beanies, the Unreal Engine beanies from like the holiday. Yep. These guys, their entire crew was using UE4 for the first time. They made this game where they actually had a big background song where they sang. It was hilarious. It's called Wet Willy. It's on the UNC one too. I highly recommend checking it out for a good
tidal
laugh.
wave that just wants hugs.
Yeah, it's a tidal wave that wants hugs. Wet Willy. Sorry, it's very catchy. And yeah, just it was a great turnout for the UNC event, and then I was really tired, so I posted what I felt like. But yeah, and this was, out of every image I've seen, I think this was the one that made me laugh the hardest. So I send people stickers constantly, and now I know that they're being put to excellent use. Great usage of UE4 stickers for these people in their pizza boxes. Let's see here. And then this is from the St. Louis group. Lots of people won raffles of stuff. So yeah, there's like mouse pads, and those are the moleskins. There's a couple of cables and whatnot. But I just wanted to say to Amanda Bott over there at St. Louis group. But thank you. It was awesome to like get to send you all this and see all the really cool pictures. You made them look really slick and professional. Cool. So that's Global Game Jam. Just wanted to say thank you to everybody who participated and show all those cool pictures. Next on the news, we've got Tim Sweeney. Tim Sweeney is going to be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at GDC. If you're going to GDC, come and check it out. If you know the history of Tim Sweeney, you understand how incredibly important he is to the game industry, how he's kind of like the founder of many concepts that today we take for granted as being kind of normal. And yeah, as a great engine developer, he's one of my personal heroes. I love getting to talk to him and hang out with him when I can, and I know he's absolutely deserving of this. But congratulations to Tim, really well earned. I think there's a really nice article here by Daniel that everyone should check out. It starts off talking about Town of Zit, which is his first game ever, made out of a he was telling us once it was made out of a word processor he was messing with, and said, you know what, I bet if I make a character that you can't move past unless you do something else, it's like a wall or a door. And then he starts building a game engine out of that. And so, wow, and here we are today, UE4 from that, I guess. But hey, thank you, Tim, for everything you've done. We just want to say, good work, and we'll see you at GDC getting your award too. That's it for the news today. We've got Community Spotlight. So every week I like to highlight all the people that have gotten up here on the high score board here for Answer Hub. If you're not familiar with it, we have answers.unrealengine.com, which is a place you can come to ask questions, report bugs, or help people with their various questions and bugs. By helping people, you get karma points in return. So these karma points add up, and every 7 days we get a nice high score going. And those top 3 people up here are going to get a forum badge, and everyone on the list we're going to give a nice shout out to here. So let's go down the list. Clean Cut, congratulations. You've been up here quite a bit. Amsanity, same thing. Good work. Great to see you up here again. Tamfoy, I feel that you're a new name entirely, but maybe it's just been a while. But Tamfoy, thank you so much. Project Geist. Shoddy 46290. D'Artanla, sorry, don't know that one yet. D'Artanla, Shadow River, of course. Esed, we've seen you around quite a bit. Luos, hey buddy. And Elite Reloaded. So thank you all so much for getting up here. The top 3, like I said, will be getting forum badges, and if you get up here on the top 3 times, you get a special forum badge with also a gold star, so everyone knows how incredibly helpful you are. So thank you everybody for helping each other out and coming up here on the list. All right, for our first community spotlight item, actually, we have 2 tutorials today to show off as spotlight items, which is really cool. The first one here, this is a 40-minute long video that Andre Allen did based off of some of our new stuff we've done with render targets in blueprints. So he's made deformable snow before in another tutorial. If you check out Andre Allen's YouTube channel, you'll see he actually has another snow deformer tutorial. This is a new one based on the new features that we've added in for just render target stuff with blueprints.
Yeah, I think
so
414 maybe?
yeah, I think it's 414. So it's just an update in a way, but it's a completely different way of building it. I feel like this is the more performant way, so you probably want to do it this way. But there you go. Andre Allen, cool. Thank you so much for sharing that tutorial. I know that's actually a commonly requested one, is just snow deformers and ground deformers. Second one here is Unreal Game Dev, all one word. Game is spelled G-A-I-M-E. Game Dev sent me over a few playlists that I thought were pretty neat. But if you combine these two, the quest system and the inventory system, you get a pretty solid RPG system just kind of off the bat. It's a pretty long series for the full inventory, but it's pretty robust. Quest system, similar setup, and then he has just 55 videos of general tutorials. So if you're looking for more tutorials for UE4 or just getting started or working on RPG, he seems to have you set here. So check out Unreal Game Dev's channel. Really nice set. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also, if you out there who are watching haven't been highlighted up here before, but you do make tutorial series, such as Matthew Wadstein's tutorial series that we've shown off before, or these here, send them over to me via the forums, Twitter, Facebook, however you get a handle of me. I'm Alex Pascal across the board. So next up is yeah, Dead Metal Punk's demo got released. So I'm not going to play the trailer today because we're a little tight on time as is. But Dead Metal Punks is a really, really cool game. It's sort of like if you took Contra and also Metal Slug and kind of put them together, which is kind of funny because they're already sort of similar to each other. And then you just went crazy with the special effects, particle effects, and just colors everywhere. If you haven't seen Dead Metal Punks before on YouTube, check it out. But they've just put out a demo for feedback, and it's out on their YouTube page. But they also have this forum post here where they, interact back with you. You can talk back and forth about the design and whatnot. So highly suggest checking out their demo and giving them feedback. Really cool game, by the way, team. So just want to say, looks great. All right, phew. Those are the community spotlights. And now I'm gonna go into presentation mode. Pow. Cool. So 415 preview. Thank you so much, by the way, Michael, for joining me today. Unfortunately, Mike Fricker is wrist deep in GDC preparation. Thank you, Mike, for coming by and just going over stuff with us, too, to review things. But we have a couple things to show off. I'm going to let you hit the next button since you're a little bit closer to it. But all right.
Mouse moves, by the way.
You got ha 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 ha. You know what? Just give it, you joker. Oh, see what you made me do. No, okay.
You can use the mouse wheel.
So, so first things up, Switch platform support is an experimental, though it is functioning. They wanted me to make sure I do throw out it is technically an experimental mode still. Yep. You can sign up for it just like you do for PS4 and for Xbox One, so you just have to get approval through Nintendo's site, and then they send us a message, and then you get access to the P4 branch, which is going to give you all of the stuff you need for packaging to Switch. So that's available. That's really neat, and I'm very hyped for Switch myself, so I know a lot of you out there were asking about the support, and yeah, it's there. There you go. Just go to the Nintendo site and get them to approve you. Next up, improved texture streaming. So let's see here. A lot of stuff has been happening to texture streaming in this upgrade. I feel like there's been a lot made in here that's just in general improvements for the engine, so that's really good. Yep. This one is, as it says, texture loading time, memory usage, and CPU time have been improved across the board. Texture streaming now handles per component visibility, so as a chunk of your asset gets called off, that'll actually get handled properly. Async texture streaming tasks enabling dynamic component processing to occur in parallel with other game thread tasks. This is going to just make things quite a bit faster, just in general. for your CPU. Automatic memory budgeting. This used to be done manually, so now the texture streaming system just automatically adjusts to handle your varying memory budgets. So that'll just save you a lot of headache. Low resolution artifact reduction. Mesh UV densities are now computed per material instead of per mesh, which just saves you a lot on artifact reduction.
Yeah, so if you have like a detail texture that has UVs with a very different scale than other ones, it won't artificially make that detail texture come in at a really high resolution. But in general, like the changes were really beneficial. I think it's pretty substantial reduction in the amount of textures that we load initially in Paragon, and then in the amount that we stream in over time. And so that also helps with the CPU as well.
Yeah. And in addition to having all those, we're also going to have some debug visualization tools. So you'll actually be able to see this in action as well. Cooking blueprints to C++. This one is long requested and implemented, and then kind of taken out and then re-implemented as a different version of it.
Well, no, it's basically the same system that's just been under development. It's been experimental for a long time, but in 4.15 we're removing the experimental flag basically. It's not. We're not using it for all of our games, but for example, we're using it for Robo Recall, and we're having good success there. So.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of my favorite thing about things like Robo Recall is by eating our own dog food, by making games in our own engine, we always get to improve on it based on real world experiences. This is just straight up reduction of overhead, exclusively nativized individual blueprints, or you can you can exclusively do it individually, or you can just say everything nativized, and then it's a checkbox in project packaging. That's it. So there's no headache to it, and then everything nativizes during cooking. So performance-wise, you'll just see general improvements there. Faster C++ compile times. Okay, now this is a really big change to just all of our code in general, right?
Yeah, so it's not a big change from the point of view of somebody consuming the code, but basically every header, every CPP in Unreal Engine has been changed so that it's now include what you use. So we don't include like these big monolithic headers like engine.h that then include in turn like 100 other headers. We only include the specific ones that that particular file needs. So that makes each one of these individual files compile faster. And there's some new tools in Unreal Build Tool that kind of enforce these requirements so that it'll basically warn you if you're doing this from engine code. By default, we don't warn you for gameplay code because we don't want to make the upgrade path difficult. But if you do include what you use in your game code too, that can definitely help your individual compile times for when you modify game code. Another benefit is if you've ever had an issue where you try and include, say, particle component.h, it used to not compile on its own. You had to also go include a couple of other headers that it implicitly required. Now all of the headers include everything that they need, so you should never run into that problem anymore. Like if you see a type in a file that you want to use, you can just include that one header and it should just work.
Yep, it just kind of grabs whatever you need and then sort of auto attaches what it needs to it, right?
Well, I mean, basically, it just in turn includes everything that it needs directly, or it forward declares. I mean, if you can forward declare something, that's better because then you don't even have to compile it at all.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that should, we actually had a couple of questions about just faster compile times and stuff like that in general off of the forum, so I feel that this at least gets you in the right direction.
Yeah, and we've seen like a full engine rebuild could be up to 50% faster. It's been a really huge win.
Yeah, so that's a number right there for you, 50% faster.
For full rebuild, not for iterative changes necessarily.
UI blur rects. This was actually something that Matt Kohlenschmidt came on and talked quite a bit about some of the new UMG UI features, but this was one that he mentioned was going to be in 4.15, so this is in the preview now. This one's really cool, background blur in UMG. You've actually, if you've played Paragon, you've probably seen it in the menus there, where you bring up a sub-menu and it comes forward, and then everything else around it blurs out. That's how they're doing that. It's just a float value that drives it from 0 to 100. Pretty straightforward. Matt also, in his previous stream, explains the trade-offs as far as performance and how much you're blurring stuff, because it does... It's a minor impact on performance, but if you start stacking them, you're gonna feel it.
Well, and if you end up doing like multiple full screen blur passes, that's gonna start hurting a lot.
Yeah, so that's just gonna be a lot to render. So Next up, sequencer animation blending. This is really sweet new feature. So supports weighted blending between multiple animations, including support for additive local space animations. Yeah. Any number of animations can be blended, and then it's basically the way that it works is now you can just kind of drag and drop the animation tracks straight into this like track system that you can see actually just above. I'm trying to see. There we go. Just above my head, because I see I'm a little box. So just above my head here, you can see that there's these tracks. So you can just stack the animation tracks, open the curve editor, and start blending them from there.
Yep.
It's really nice. Lena's been going to town on this one. I've got a lot in here actually about animation stuff. We'll have to have her come back on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So this brings us to another experimental feature: sequencer animations and blueprints. This like they made a note that said very experimental, not just experimental, very experimental, because this was kind of brand spanking new.
Well, just in general, one note about experimental is, in general, when we label something as experimental, it's fine to try it out and give us feedback. That's great, but don't necessarily take it into your full production game.
Yeah.
The switch support we mentioned earlier is a little bit different in that regard, in that there's not going to be huge breaking changes between when we experimental versus not experimental. It just means that we're still going through the development process on that.
Mm-hmm.
But for something like this, we could dramatically change the interface on something in the future.
Yep.
And we don't want you to have relied on it and then be sad that we've broken your game in the next release, when we kind of promised that we might do that.
Yeah,
by labeling it experimental.
And that's actually kind of an important thing to note here about previews in general. And then anything, like you said, anything experimental. Previews do not upgrade your, if you have a production project that you're going to sell, wouldn't recommend upgrading it to a preview. It's a great way to see what things are going to be coming ahead of time. And it's a great way to give us feedback on those things well ahead of time, and make sure that if there's a critical bug or something like that, we can actually get some time to look at it beforehand.
Yeah, so it's totally fine to make a copy of your project, open that up in 4.15, or in a copy of an asset, start messing around with experimental features. Just don't sort of on the only version of your project, upgrade to the latest experimental feature. It's just
probably a bad practice.
Yeah.
But that being said, these are really awesome features to check out. Just explore them, see what they look like right now, and we'll probably have new iterations.
It's great
of them.
to get early feedback.
I remember the original versions of Sequencer look nothing like they do right now. So I can guarantee you there will always be UX UI workflow changes. You can you can enable it by adding the actor sequence plugin to your project, and then look for the actor sequence component, and then it will create this little track down here.
Yep.
So next up is another experimental one. This is the content hot reloading. So this is really great. You just keep the editor open while you're reloading. You can do this where you're syncing stuff off P4, or you just have content GitHub wherever you can pull it in.
Well, the important thing is the current version only works if you're basically doing the source control syncs through the editor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sync separately in P4V or separately via command line Git, the editor's not going to be aware necessarily of what all's changed. So this is really more like if you in the editor, you can right click and say sync this directory if you've hooked up source control.
Oh yeah.
It's got some other neat features, like you can actually revert effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So if you made some local modifications to an asset, instead of having to close the editor and say don't save, you can right click on that asset and say reload from disk, and it'll go back to what that last copy was.
Yeah, and there's a nice little right click option for it too. If you have the asset in the view, or you have the asset somewhere in your content browser, you just right click and say reload. There you go. And then that's the requirement. It must be using init or source control. Cool. Next up, high dynamic range display output, experimental. This one is an NVIDIA specific feature, but it does work.
Well, on Windows.
Oh yeah, for Windows. Sorry, for Windows, it's an NVIDIA specific feature, but it also has the PS4 and Mac Metal platform versions of it. But this one is just something that handles full processing of rendering seen through standard ACES transforms, and has path implemented for 1000 to 2000 nit display outputs. This one is a little bit outside of my regular wheelhouse as far as what I do, but a lot of people have mentioned to me that they wanted a nice HDR output, so I'm hoping that this scratches that itch.
Yep.
Of course, give us your feedback. It's experimental, so.
Well, one of the things mentioned there is the ACES transform. We're also switching the default tone mapper in UE4 to use the ACES tone mapper.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot of specific details, but my understanding is it's a filmic tone mapper that's, it's a really good defaults basically, and then it is set up right so that you can do HDR and stuff like that as well.
Next up, mobile rendering preview in viewport. So this one is pretty much as the name implies. You set up in your project settings what you want your target platform to be as far as a mobile device, and then it actually makes adjustments inside of the viewport to kind of emulate that, and that'll allow you to get a better idea what it's going to look like on device before you even push it to device and test it there. So it's really great. OpenGL ES 3.1, Metal, and Vulkan supported. Yeah, pretty straightforward, like I said.
Yeah, this can definitely help if you're sort of like, am I doing sort of lower end mobile where I'm trying to hit the largest market, or am I doing the higher end, which supports the latest APIs and stuff. So.
Let's see here. Someone actually literally just asked this in chat, but map set containers for blueprints. These were experimental. These are now out of experimental. Yeah, I like the phrasing on this is great. Maps map keys to values. I didn't write that. That's copy pasted from a developer, by the way. So this is really cool if you're familiar with how it works.
In some languages, maps are called dictionaries, but they're basically like you can do associative lookups where I pass in a key and then I get back a value that's associated with that key. Sets are basically just, I want to know whether or not a set contains something. So I don't care necessarily about the order that they're in, and I don't want duplicates. I just want to say, does this set contain this value? And then arrays are sort of the traditional like linear list of elements that order is important. You can have duplicates and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Just one note about it is that arrays are a lot faster if you're not using find or contain, and they're actually even faster even if you are using find or contain, if like the number of elements in the list is fairly small.
Yep.
So a lot of times you may still end up using an array for things, but if you have tens or hundreds of elements, maps and sets can be really useful.
Yep.
As part of this, is it in the next slide or?
No.
Okay, yeah. The type, like when you're editing the type in a blueprint.
I had that picture up here too. I know.
I'm not sure what happened to it.
Yeah, that's weird because it was right there. But yeah.
Basically, when you before, like when you select a variable on the details panel, you could change the type of the variable and toggle it between like a single value or an array.
Yeah.
Now in that same place, either over in the details panel or directly in the variables list, that icon is now a drop down, and so you can pick between, is it a single value, is it an array, a map, or a set.
So if you remember like the 3 boxes by 3 boxes little icon that shows up if you switch between array and single variable, yeah, like you said, drop down now. So that's really handy if you just if you want to have more control, or if you just need like a lighter container for all of your asset knowledge.
And there's still a few limitations with maps and sets. That the biggest one that you'll deal with is that they're not replicated, and that's true both in blueprints and native. That's not a limitation specifically of blueprints.
All right. That's a good note, though. Yeah. So gameplay tags, they're not new because they've been around for quite a while in experimental, but now they're out of experimental, which is really cool. Yep. So I think you explained it better than I do, because they told it to me and then I tried to repeat it backwards, and I think I said hierarchical really terribly, and Mike gave me a weird look.
Yeah. So gameplay tags are not only out of experimental, the UI to deal with them and some of the code to deal with them has actually gotten a lot of love in this last build as well. So it's a lot simpler to, when you're doing queries on like a container full of gameplay tags, to express your intent. Like it was always kind of unclear with the old version, where you could kind of had these two separate bools that talked about whether it's my parent or not my parent and stuff like that. And so now they're worded a little bit better. But at a high level, gameplay tags are kind of smart names. Like you can say, basically anywhere where you would have used a name, like in a drop-down, like tags on actors or things like that. Gameplay tags allow you to basically ensure that you're picking from like a good list of them. So you can't type in the name wrong. You can't do things like that. But you can also have containers of tags and then do queries on that container, like does this container have any tags of this type or any tags that have this prefix effectively.
Yeah.
So for example, you could have attack.damage.fire and attack.damage.ice, and you could ask, hey, does this have any damage in it? And you just look for like attack.damage.
Yeah, I think Mike explained it's like it would be attack.damage.asterisk, and then it would just find you anything underneath that.
You don't effectively do an asterisk. You just do the search with attack.damage and say it's not an exact match.
Oh, okay. Well then, all right, cool. So yeah, that's why we left that little note up there. So it's like if you subclass things down, you can just kind of grab entire classes of stuff.
Yeah, and you may not choose that hierarchy. You might want to flip it around and you actually do something like fire, and then it's fire damage, and then you can ask for all things of type fire. The gameplay tags are kind of like the foundation of some of our other systems. Like it's sort of not really ready for external use, but like the gameplay system heavily uses gameplay tags. And we've discussed trying in the long term to move more systems to use gameplay tags. So for example, like actor.tags and component.tags, it's just there's some backwards compatibility issues there that we haven't quite figured out yet.
All right, so we'll probably have to spend some time on that one too, but it's it is fresh out of experimental, so let us know your feedback about it too, so we can actually polish and fix those little bugs too. Yeah,
but anywhere you were thinking about using an F name, and even some places where you might have used a custom enum, I definitely consider gameplay tags.
Yeah. It's just a better way of sorting out information in general. So next up, VR editor, menu improvements, and number pad. So this one's pretty quick too. We've got redesigned menus that are now consistent with the desktop editor and more extensible. Mike explained it as kind of being, you're going to look at them and they're going to look about the same, but actually the way that they function behind the scenes is quite different and allows you to extend them with what you want in your code a little bit easier. And then numpad is a new thing that I think so that was Lauren's invention right there. It's very useful for just entering bits of number information in any given field. Instead of having to hop out of your keyboard and back in, etc., you just basically, I guess you kind of like shoot the box you want, and then a little dial comes up and you can actually put in negative values, a decimal point, and then just a simple numpad on it. But it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're tired of picking up and putting down your HMD to test things out inside of the VR editor. And we're hoping to improve on that more too, because they last time we showed off the keyboard that they had worked on, where you actually like have a xylophone-esque keyboard where you like bang on it to type. But that was a tester, kind of an experimental thing. So let's see here. I love this GIF, but I'm told that we're going to use a different one for the final product. But I want to make sure that everyone gets to see Mark Audi driving his car around, pedal to the metal.
That's the first and probably last time he's ever on the stream.
I can't get him out here, man. But yeah, Mark, he made this really great raw input plugin, which is cool. A lot of people are asking us for stuff like joystick support and various kinds of flight control supports and stuff. And so he made this great support for Windows for steering wheels, flight sticks, and other non-X input devices. I can't tell you how many times I've seen requests for that, and I guess he was just like, it's happening now. This is the build. It's really fun, and you can reconfigure the whole thing. Apparently, he gave you a bunch of generic key bindings to start off with. Like, let's see here. Axis 1 was the wheel, 2 is the gas, 3 is the brake, but you can just override those with whatever you have for acceleration and braking systems. And I know some people out there that like to work with like Arduino Uno and like little microcontrollers who build their own systems, so this will probably...
basically anything that'll come in as like a HID joystick should work through this. Yeah,
so you guys can probably create some wacky input methods, and I would love to see that. And then you can just rebind everything, not just the generic USB controller keys. So you can kind of make up what you need to make it work. That should be a lot of fun. Next, vehicle support move to plugin. So James Golding apparently did this as a kind of method to help people that aren't using vehicles to kind of lighten their engine too, and also give you the opportunity to kind of inject your own code as well if you want. I thought this was kind of interesting. We've refactored vehicle physics support into an optional plugin. So it's a checkbox now in the plugins. And so if you're using something that has no need for vehicles at all, you can just uncheck it and not use any of that code, and that's just very helpful for a lot of games, just weight-wise.
Well, long term, we want to try and refactor a lot more functionality out of the core engine into plugins like this, so that like if you're shipping a mobile game, you can sort of compile out those sections of code that you're not using. And it also, in doing so, it forces us to make sure that the interfaces in the engine are properly extensible, because like the slide mentions, there were a number of things James had to change when he moved it into a plugin, but that also makes it possible that somebody could replace that plugin with a different plugin, and they can extend at the same points. So.
And this is a conversation I've had with a lot of our developers as far as how do we reduce your final package size and game size so that we can make it more and more performant, much smaller. So this is step one of many to modularizing the entire engine, which is really cool. I'm sure you guys will hear more and more about it as we convert more chunks of systems into plugins and separate them out, so you can choose whether or not you're going to be using them. So cool. Next on the list, force feedback component. Yay! This one's just a big improvement of force feedback component. I feel like the old one was the force feedback function. I think it just was basically very basic, kick it off, what amount of intensity, and just about that. With this new force feedback component, which I think is interesting, it's called a component because you can actually spawn it into the world as an actor as well, but it allows you to set up a lot of controls around it, where you can say there's a certain distance you are from something, and therefore it affects the amount of strength that has, and instead of having to come up with your own math for distances and stuff and feed that into it, it just figures it out for you. You can do a lot more as far as control-wise, location-wise, if you want it to be based off of where the character is, or it's like a point in the world that if you get close to that point, it sets something off. Just great redesign, I think, for general usage, as opposed to being very direct. You, player, rumble controller when I tell you to.
Yep.
Why did we stop calling them rumble packs, man? I guess it was literally the pack was like a brand or something.
I think, Rumble PAK was probably like a trademark of Nintendo or something.
I always preferred that over force feedback. It was like, rumble pack. Rumble was always a better name. PlayStation VR aim controller support. Straightforward. We now have a controller component. I think it's pretty simple, and if you're using one of these for development, it's now just kind of pre-built. I know a couple people were probably rolling their own custom versions of support for this, but now it's just built right on in. Next, mathematics material and previous frame switch nodes. So let's see here. We have pre-made common operations now that are mapped to shader intrinsics mostly. A few of these aren't, but they didn't specify exactly to me which ones weren't. Math nodes are now marked with the fast tag. They will execute approximations instead of real instruction.
There's basically two different versions. You can use the fast one if the approximation works fine for you, and then the non-fast one is going to be closer to the correct mathematical definition. But most of the time, when you're using it to make something, pulse or flicker or something, it doesn't really matter if it's accurate.
Yeah, exactly. So if you need if you're doing something with the math where you're going to need very precise numbers, like in the output, then keep it on the regular. If you're kind of running it loose, then you're fine with fast. This is a performance trade-off. So.
Yep.
Let's see here, and then this is the previous frame switch material node that we had. So this one, it's for very specific use cases. It's not going to be used in every material that you have out there, but it just allows you to override world position offsets during motion vector generation. So by default, the world offset material parameters will be compiled twice to allow per frame effects to generate detailed motion. This doesn't always provide the best results when the parameters are changing per frame. So you can actually do this. It's where every other frame it makes an adjustment instead. And actually, what we're seeing here is a still box that, by using this, has created a false acceleration and vertex deformation, which is kind of interesting. But we'll have a lot more details about this one out too when the final release notes are out. Like I said, very specific use cases here. Pre-skin local normal material mode, material node, I should say. These are also pretty cool. I think we've shown off. I feel like we've shown off this image before in the stream, but I might be mistaken. But these are pretty cool. They work very similarly to the pre-skin local position node, but instead it's just normal based. So as you can see, it maps everything pretty cleanly to the character, and it just allows a lot of local space mesh aligned effects. Yep. Very cool for those specific use cases, and if you're working in materials, you understand their power. Speaking of interesting shaders and materials, Mac Metal Tessellation and Pixel Shader. So this one's cool. For Mac, as the name implies. Full support for Unreal Engine's tessellation features have been implemented using the new metal tessellation pipeline provided by Apple. Also experimental support for HDR rendering on Macs. We've got a lot of new HDR stuff put into this version of the engine. I really like these animated GIFs because you can just see exactly the power of tessellation in metal. That splash, it just becomes infinitely more, deep. You've got a lot more depth to the actual flow coming down, and it just looks cool. It will make you happy if you're making something on Mac. I just really like tessellation myself as a effect, so it's cool. Sequencer event track payloads. Yeah, this is really interesting because now sequencer event tracks can output like a ton of information as part of. Actually, you'll probably notice there's a lot in here about sequencer becoming much more modularized, interacting a lot more with blueprints, passing along more information, and I'll get in a little bit of how we expect that to work in a second here. But you can now
let you pass in parameters to a function, basically. And so you can set those parameters, at the key in sequencer. Yeah,
not totally unlike having the events in an animation just trigger an event, except for this gives you a ton of info that you can use straight out of that sequence. And then, creating a struct that defines the parameters of your event. But what that leads to is also a combination of this. Animate dynamic objects with sequencer. Expose sequencer track bindings through blueprints for more procedural content. This is so funny to look at it like this, and I feel like we need like a picture of Dynasty Warriors or like something huge, because what it really translates to is you've made a sequence, like you've won a battle, right? And everyone's walking around and you have troops to your left and your right. But how many troops do you have? Well, maybe you had a Pyrrhic victory and you have like 3 dudes over here and 2 over here. Well, now since you can pass that info in and you can switch out the healthy guys for the wounded guys dynamically with this, every battle now has an interesting cutscene afterwards. Maybe your enemy won, so it's not you walking down, but it's your enemy. And you can blend straight out of gameplay. So it creates this really like cool flowing effect of you fought some people. Depending on how that went, the camera comes in and possesses a cinematic scene, and the scene changes depending on what all you've input into it. So now skipping a cutscene might not be a great idea because it dynamically changes every time. Just really cool feature that is shown in a couple nodes.
Well, and you can use it for level stuff too. So for example, you can make sort of in the same way you can use timelines to move individual components within an actor, you can make a sequence that, say, moves an entire platform from point A to point B. And you could do that right now with blueprints, but this would allow you to use like the sequencer tools to key it out and then replace what the platform looks like, with a different actor.
Yeah,
wherever it is.
Just totally swap out actors, models, characters, so your whole world can look desolated because one thing happened, or half desolated, or you could actually set up like a little float for how horrible things went or great things went.
Yeah, and so sort of like this, plus once the sequencer component is out of experimental, will sort of let you have sequencer things, sort of entirely self-contained within blueprints. So it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be really awesome. So it just makes me think like, why go to a movie when we could have like a dynamic movie that's built out of blueprints now? So that'll be cool. And then, so I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of animation improvements, and this in the release notes is going to be several pages worth of notes, but I've tried to condense this as much as I can. Apologies to Lena. She put in a ton of work into these great new blend space editor changes. First things first, we have an image here of the before and after. On the left is what it used to look like. On the right is going to be the new setup. It's a little bit cleaner and streamlined. But overall, it's pretty similar still how it functions, but there's a few fixes and improvements.
Yeah, it's gotten an overhaul pass to work a lot better than it used to.
Yeah.
Be easier to use, really.
So let's see here. Multiple ways of changing sample properties. Yeah, the context menu and spin boxes have been added to change either the sample value or animation sequence. So they're a little bit small on there, but there's better boxes that you can work with out of it. Let's see here. Previewing the blend space by holding shift down to pin the value. So you can actually pin essentially where the camera is, and then change and pin where he is, and kind of change where you're looking to see a preview.
We'll pin the
of the mesh.
parameters basically. So because in the old version, like basically if you just accidentally swung your mouse across it,
Yeah.
you'd be going through the parameter space, and
and
that's not what you wanted when you were going to grab another sample point and dropping it in, and you want to see what that sample point change did.
yeah, I don't want to see it clamps it, but it kind of like prevents you from hitting certain weird kind of angle issues because you can lock it in yourself and just say where you want to be. But it's pretty useful for just previewing. Samples get snapped to new grid when it's resized. So yeah, that was another thing she mentioned. The grid, as you can see, is very different, and one of the new features to the grid itself is, the snapping will change based off of, the size of either axis is changed. The existing samples we snap to the closest available grid point. So
you're still
as you
specifying the grid resolution. It's just that if you change the grid resolution, it automatically makes sure that the points are still snapped to the grid.
Yep.
After that change, which didn't happen before.
Yeah, they would kind of just be wherever they were, and then you'd see the grid points kind of shift. So it's an improvement, bug fix, both at the same time. Drag and drop operations. Yep, you can just drag and drop them, and if it's going to work, it'll let you, and if it doesn't work, it just kind of shoots it back and doesn't let you drag in the operation. So that's really cool. And then yes, this actually kind of is a neat one. We seem to be adding in a lot of features that just kind of make a lot of more dramatic moments cleaner to me. Like this is post snapshot, and it was included so that if someone gets knocked out or ragdolls and they collapse, you ever seen that awkward animation in a game where something collapses in a ragdoll and then snaps into its perfect like animation of it standing up?
Yep.
And it looks a little weird. So what you can do with this is, if you ragdoll, you choose a point where it stops ragdolling, you cut that pose out by saving the pose snapshot, feed that into your pose animation where you kind of start it.
You can blend it back into the full animation.
Started
so
at that.
It's the ragdoll recovery.
Yeah, exactly. So you can just kind of have him glide into that instead of having that weird snapping effect. So.
And there can be other interesting things where you might end up
course.
using this, but that's really the main use. And this is not a replacement for like save cache pose and use cache pose. All the cases where you'd use save and use cache pose, you'd still use them for that. Like you wouldn't replace them with this.
Yeah. This one was, though it can be used for quite a few different things. It was pretty straightforward, developed for that, and can be used for others. So mass properties debugging. This is just a really nice new debugger show flag, which is cool. Show advanced and mass properties. It visualizes the center of mass on any object with physics, and then you get a thickness of each axis to indicate the movement of inertia magnitude along that axis. So you just kind of get an idea, like if you see a cylinder, it's going to have more on one axis versus a cone or a cube. So just gives you a better approximation when just looking at them of where they might end up turning, falling over, or going. So.
And that can also be useful if there's something wrong, like if it's not where you think it should be within that shape, then
Yeah, like if you see that cylinder and for some reason it's weighting heavy down here, then that's something weird. You're going to want to check out how the mesh was built, and or maybe like where your collision's set up. Let's see here. Modify curve animation node. I could also call this when we put some more math in there. So there's a nice new node here, modify curve, where you can inject math into your curve. Which immediately makes me think of things like, if you wanted to do things based off of timing in the world, or like if you had a game that has music beats on it, you want the characters sort of adjust slightly to their curve to make them bounce with the beat.
Well, and it can also be useful if you have curves that you're mostly driving through animation, but sometimes under gameplay control, since you've got like that alpha value there, you could sort of inject something in, and then all the code sort of at the other end doesn't have to change, to handle this sometimes case.
Yep.
So either it's coming from this node or it's coming from whatever animation that you had it authored in.
Yep. Next up, improved font assets. So this is an overall change to how font assets work. I'm probably going to want to have Matt come on again and just really get into some details about why and how these changes were made and how you can expect them to work now. But overall, they're now split into two kinds of assets, and this is much better for, I guess, modular fonts. If you have like a ton of fonts that you're making adjustments to and changing at runtime, this is really cool. It basically just addresses a lot of issues with memory consumption by splitting them into two different things. And as it explains here, the font face just gets added into the font asset, which then kind of controls the font face information, and then you can feed that where you need to. But this is going to be an automatic update. So if you load your project into 4.15, it's according to the notes and everything, it should just click all your stuff over and make those changes. So don't be shocked when they show up.
Yeah, basically, if you open the font editor, it's going to look different.
It's going to be pretty different looking, and when we have a full release and all that, we can expect docs and some training content.
Yep. But it can really help in terms of memory consumption, because with the old way, it was easy to accidentally end up with the same font face loaded into memory multiple times. So.
Yep. Linux. We have 2 notes here for new Linux features. Linux ARM64 support. You have to, currently only boards with desktop GL are supported, but it's in there for those guys. And launch on to remote Linux machines, so you can do launch on to just anything that you have your Linux machine set up with your editor, UFE, and it greatly reduces iteration time. Just really quick little updates for people that are developing on Linux. So, this one's one I'm pretty excited for. I know it's a weird thing to be excited for, but I love VR so much. Monoscopic far-field rendering for mobile VR. This isn't experimental, but please check it out. Give us your feedback. Basically, since stereo divergence decreases as objects are rendered farther from the camera, at a certain point it becomes indistinguishable from mono. However, it's still eating up that stereo cycles. So. This is really cool. This feature just divides the scene into 2 partitions with a clipping plane. So you have essentially a certain distance. Everything will switch back to a mono rendering, and then everything ahead of that is stereo. And so this is going to create a huge performance win on your mobile VR devices. However, it's still experimental. Under project settings, rendering VR, check the checkbox. Give us your feedback. I really want to see where this one goes, because I think it'll be cool to see Gear VR updates and all that.
Yep. And so one thing about this though is that it is effectively rendering some portion of the scene 3 times, because it renders the near field for your left and for your right, and then the far field once.
Yeah.
And so it's not always a win in all circumstances.
Yeah.
But for a lot of content, it should be a pretty good win.
For I think the majority of use cases, you'll probably end up doing fine. But yeah, with any given update, there's always going to be an edge case or 2. But yeah, I could see if you had a couple of funky layer designs going on, might not be so great. Custom stencil on mobile post-process. I actually don't have a ton of details of this myself, but it does require mobile HDR option to be enabled and a non-mosaic device. However, it does just straight up enable your ability to do custom stencils, which look fantastic. I'm going to have to get more info for the final release of it to maybe give you more details on how to activate it and use it. But so far, these are the details I have, that in project settings under rendering and post-processing, you just have a enabled option, and then that'll let you use these.
And so you can do all the same things you do on desktop with stencils, in terms of doing outline shaders or team coloring, at a distance or whatever.
Yeah. Now I don't have, like I said, a ton of details as far as like what the limitations and things to expect from this one are. But please try it, check it out. It's brand spanking new. It's very cool. Let's see. Oh yeah, Android graphics debugger integration. So yeah, now you can have third-party graphics debuggers in your Android project, so that you can actually get some interesting debugging from what they provide. Both of these here, I think you can. They're a little bit hard to see, but it's the Adreno and Mali versions. And yeah, it's basically there's a drop-down menu, but you do have to go to their website. Pick up their debugger and follow their instructions for getting it running, and then we'll have also our own little docs for it as well. But yeah, it just shows up in the drop-down menu, and then that's very helpful if you're using anything on Android. This one is really neat. It's location services for GPS data on Android and iOS. A lot of people that were developing for Android and iOS were just kind of rolling their own little solutions for these, but now they're just pre-built, really fast GPS information that you would, need. We have get last known location and all that in there, but there's a few other things here for if something goes wrong, if they start cutting off your ability to read what they're doing, like if they start disabling their location services, etc.
Or you go into a tunnel or whatever.
Yeah, go into a tunnel. There's a few more nodes also exposed that are just great for debugging and sending them little messages that say, hey, I noticed you turned location tracking off, or you're somewhere I can't track you, so the game will not work. So those are all now built in instead of you having to roll your own. And then, they have a note there. It's under Services, Mobile, and Location. And that's that. And the final one on here, you thought I was going to skip it. No, I'm not. It's Material Editor Reroute nodes. They're really great. They function exactly like you would expect them to out of the Blueprint editor. You can double-click on a spline string, and then that'll create a node there, or you can right-click, and it's under Utility Add Reroute node. And that's just how they work. They're exactly as simple as you want them to be. So, and look at the clean, straight lines in your material editor now. Everyone can have their sanity back. But those are the features that I've got for you today. We actually have a ton more features. They are still actively writing more things into the notes when I was writing up these things for today.
You're gonna get the typical huge release notes stock when it comes out.
Yeah, you can expect a novella. It's already up to several many pages, and several many. I don't know how to describe it. It's every time I open it, there's more. So it's gonna be fun. And yes, that's them. It was actually really great to get to dig through and make these slides this time around, because I got to learn a lot about different parts of the engine I don't normally get to explore in. But those are what we're showing off now, and as I said, we'll do another stream once 4.15's totally out the door, and a series of streams for all the major features to go over them. But this is just kind of our major notes, and check out the release notes when they come out. It'll be, like he said, a book. A book. Just thinking about it, sorry. So past that, let's see here. We've got next Tuesday, I'd like to say we're going to have Miashko come on. We're going to do a kind of getting started with AI. I'm going to go over some basics of how to make your characters interact. Just a couple AI guys to get you started. If you haven't gotten too deep into gameplay programming and AI programming, then this will be a great stream for you. If you're a student, it's probably a good one for you. Last thing is a reminder that we have a subscribe buttons somewhere depending on what format you're watching us. Please subscribe to us, please follow us, like, comment, etc. All those things that we like to throw out. There's probably stuff below us, whatever. There's icons all over UIs in every direction because we stream to a few different places. But yes, check those out. We'll see you on the AI stream on Tuesday. And also, whoa, almost forgot, got to mention this one. After the stream is over, when the camera shuts off, I'm actually going to be running to downtown Raleigh to 5 Star to do the meetup there. And if you're not familiar, you can go to meetups.com/pro/Unreal Engine, and you'll see every meetup. There's probably one right next door to you. You didn't even know it. And these meetups are awesome. You meet other UE4 developers. There's often free swag, tutorials, meet real game makers in person, or be a game maker yourself and give a tutorial to people that are trying to break into the industry. So check out the meetups page, and I guess I'll just see you all around. Thank you so much for coming out, Mike.
Yep.
It's been fun. So see you next time.
So I guess we did.